Sejam muito bem-vindos ao episódio 192. Como vocês sabem, eu sou Marina Guedes e você ouve o podcast Maré Sonora. Hoje eu convido vocês a uma novidade. Recentemente eu escrevi uma matéria para a revista inglesa chamada Practical Boat Owner, também conhecida como PBO. Essa matéria foi publicada agora na edição de agosto e é isso que vai acontecer hoje. Eu vou ler a matéria em inglês para vocês de uma história muito inspiradora. Espero que vocês gostem, deixem os comentários, impressões, opiniões nas redes sociais, no YouTube, onde você puder deixar um comentário. Eu vou adorar saber o que você achou dessa história, que para mim foi realmente emocionante fazer. E eu acho que se não é inspiradora a história, não sei o que é. Esse aqui é o barulhinho das páginas da revista. A matéria saiu nas páginas 38, 39, 40 e 41. Então senta aí confortavelmente na sua poltrona, no seu sofá, prepara o seu café do Luiz e aproveite. Aqui no podcast eu tenho feito entrevistas com escritores, escritoras, na intenção de estimular a leitura. E aí hoje eu pensei, então vou fazer um podcast para também estimular a leitura, mas de uma reportagem. A matéria se chama Finding Freedom e o subtítulo, a linha fina, na verdade, né, a explicação da reportagem que vinha a seguir é essa. Between 1969 and 1973, Jérôme Poncet and Gérard Janichon sailed their 32-feet cutter, Damien, from Spitsbergen to Antarctica via the Amazon River. Marina Guedes, eu mesma, looks back at their far-flung voyage. E a gente começa assim o texto. Typically, a circumnavigation around the world from Europe is westbound, with many cruisers choosing to cross the Atlantic to the Caribbean and then through the Panama Canal to the Pacific. Those looking for a more challenging option usually follow in the wake of Sir Robin Knox Johnston and Bernard Moitessier, rounding the Great Capes along the way. But neither of these routes was chosen by school friends Jérôme Poncet and Gérard Janichon during their epic adventure aboard Damien. The trip on the 32-feet wooden cutter, which is now a historic monument based at the La Rochelle Maritime Museum, included places that a small sailboat had never reached before. From 69 to 73, Jérôme and Gérard went as far north as the Norwegian Arctic at latitude 80 degrees north, to its extreme opposite, the Antarctic Peninsula at 68 south, visiting remote places such as the Amazon and some of the subantarctic islands along the way. These were the days before chart plotters, AIS, and GPS. Neither high nor very high frequencies, also known as VHF, radios were carried on board. Instead, Jérôme and Gérard used celestial navigation, utilizing paper charts, compasses, a wristwatch, and a sextant bought for only £20 from a second-hand shop in London. We sailed in peace, recalled Jérôme 50 years later from his home in the Falkland Islands. As for keeping friends and family updated, they sent messages via the French embassies or took advantage of a method nearly extinct in the 21st century. They wrote a letter and sent it via the post. 5 years of preparation. For most high school students, once exams are out of the way, the focus is on the next step towards a career. In France, Damien's crew had one main concern, which had nothing to do with academic doubts. Their goal in 1965 was to start their voyage within 5 years. They left in 69 when they were both 22 years old. But first, they needed a boat. English naval architect Robert Tucker was chosen and commissioned in 1967 to design Damien, which was cold-molded. The boat had to accommodate 3 people and cope with occasional harsh seas and bad weather, expected while sailing further south. Jérôme's idea was inspired by a previous project of Jean Sébastien, made for the Lederling brothers back in Grenoble. The Nautic Saint-Ouen shipyard in Sion built the bare hull out of 4 5mm layers of laminated mahogany. Damien was designed to be robust but not heavy, and when finished, the boat weighed 5 tons. The rest of the work, rigging, building the interior, and painting, was completed by Jérôme and Gérard due to their limited finances. Many people also offered their services free of charge, so deeply touched were they by the spirit of adventure echoed by Jérôme, Gérard, and Jean-François, the last mate to join in. As their departure date neared, Damien's crew faced bureaucratic difficulties. The lack of watertight bulkheads and a life raft meant they were delayed until these matters were resolved. On 29 May 1969, the La Rochelle Port Authority gave the boat the green light, although stressed that Damien should not go beyond 30 miles off the coast. It didn't stop them. Above the Arctic Circle. Arrival at the Norwegian city of Bergen happened after the first storm. Damien coped well in the heavy weather, so they continued north to Spitsbergen in Svalbard, sailing through Lofoten and Tromsø. Everyone was impressed that such a small boat was going so far north. They aimed for Longyearbyen Fjord, but constant fog and compass malfunction resulted in a course deviation further north at 80 degrees north. On the way down, Damien successfully went through the Forlandsund Strait between the west coast of Spitsbergen and Prince Karl Forland Island. Good visibility and Damien's draught of just 1.45 meters, which is 4.7 feet, made the narrow 100-mile passage possible. To cope with the cold of the Arctic Circle, Damien's crew wore all of the winter clothes they had on board and drank coffee, tea, whiskey, rum, and ate apple pies. A stove was eventually installed 2 years later in the Argentine port of Ushuaia, before sailing into the Southern Ocean. This also solved Damien's condensation problem. They also fitted a dome made of plexiglasses above the companionway, so they could steer from the inside, shelter from the elements. Iceland, then around Greenland. Although quick, the stop in Iceland was relaxing for Damien's crew, with swims in cold and hot pools, a popular attraction of the volcanic island. They also obtained accurate navigation information for Greenland and Canada's east coast. The dense pack ice near Greenland prevented them from going ashore. Still, they enjoyed special moments near the world's biggest island, sailing close to glaciers, ice bags, and watching memorable Northern Lights performances. The early September crossing from Greenland to Canada was marked by constant low pressure and their first knockdown near Cape Farewell. Under sunshine and 1,500 miles later, Cape Bonavista was sighted. They made landfall at St. John's in the Canadian province of Newfoundland. But their arrival was not without incident. While Jérôme, Gérard, and Jean-François were ashore, intruders broke into Damien, stealing both the radio and tape recorder. These were swiftly returned after the trio's voyage from Greenland was covered by the local media. They also received presents of food from sympathetic residents. hard times. Damien's crew dearly remember the days spent cruising the east coast of the United States. From Marblehead in Massachusetts to New York, Delaware, Chesapeake Bay, Norfolk, and finally Morehead City, there were many stops before the worst leg, the West Indies. Reading Gérard's book, Damien, 55,000 Miles Around the World, it is clear this part of the voyage tested the crew physically and psychologically. In the US Virgin Islands, Jérôme suffered from kidney stones and then an infection, which left him hospitalized in St. Croix for 3 months. He eventually had to have one of his kidneys removed. Keeping fouling growth on Damien's hull at bay was a constant battle, and while at anchor, the cutter was struck by a stolen powerboat, being driven by a drunk skipper. And to add to the wounds, Jean-François packed and left. As Gérard summed up, they had physical, technical, and psychological accidents. Being just the two, however, contributed to a solid and ever-intact friendship among us, declared Poncet. Over the years, the pair took on other non-human crew, including cats, monkeys, chickens, and even coconut crabs. Heading inland. From Martinique, Damien reached the Salvation Islands in French Guiana, then Kourou. On the mainland, they stayed longer than planned due to the kind support from new friends who worked at the National Center of Space Studies. Kourou was an important boost in our circumnavigation, wrote Gérard. Damien and crew were then more than ready for the upcoming moment they had wished for so long, the Amazon rainforest. The months in the Amazon were meaningful for both of them, especially visiting remote villages, having come up to the state of Amapá to continue towards Manaus, 1,000 miles sailing fresh water. Close to the city of Oriximiná in the Pará state, they found a calm spot by Sapucuá Lake, which was a green paradise for them. Anchored at the protected spot, they took part in the daily life of the locals. Gérard became a bush doctor, providing medical care with the first aid kits available on Damien. And decades later, he wrote about the experience in another book, Atalaya, One Season in the Amazon. In 2021, it was republished as The Initiation. It was a simple, grandiose sharing of life. An experience that has accompanied my entire life, even today, said Gérard. Back on salt water, they sailed to Fortaleza, Salvador, and Rio de Janeiro. A postcard depicting an aerial view of Guanabara's Bay was all they used to navigate their approach to Brazil's second biggest city. From there, Damien continued south, where, according to Jérôme, their life would finally begin. Beautiful achievement. After Argentina, Damien and her crew were blessed by weather gods with calm seas and good conditions, enabling them to round Cape Horn via a very untraditional route, from east to west. They went on towards Ushuaia before heading east to the higher latitudes. In 2 years, it was the most beautiful achievement, wrote Gérard about their epic approach to South America's southernmost tip. The toughest moments were on the way to the subantarctic island of South Georgia in the last days of March 1971. In confused seas and winds gusting 60 and 70 knots, Damien capsized 3 times, with both Jérôme and Gérard trapped down inside for several minutes. On the final time, the boat was dismasted, although the mast was salvaged. The pair used the wooden spinnaker pole to set up a jury rig and sailed Damien to the port of Grytviken, where the staff of the British Antarctic Survey welcomed them. In South Georgia, Jérôme and Gérard installed the original salvaged aluminium mast, albeit shorter, and made other repairs before leaving for Cape Town. A few more knockdowns and 3,000 miles later, Damien limped into the South African city, again under jury rig. Their priority on arrival was to ship a new aluminum mast from Europe and to prepare the boat for Antarctica. They headed south again in December 1971, visiting the remote islands of Crozet, Kerguelen, known as the Desolation Islands, Heard and Macquarie, but bad weather, ice, and their compasses being affected by magnetic disturbances meant cutting short their voyage and sailing to Australia, New Caledonia, Fiji, the Cook Islands, and French Polynesia. In Tahiti, they caught up with Bernard Moitessier, who they greatly admired. Our trip would have not been complete if we had missed this meeting, said Gérard. Antarctica at last. The second longest leg of the entire voyage was from Tahiti to the Antarctic Peninsula, the 4,500-mile trip being completed in 37 days when they made landfall at Adelaide Island. It was the first time such a small sailing boat had moored this far south in the Antarctic Circle. Solo sailor David Lewis on Icebird arrived several weeks earlier, but did not go as far south as Jérôme and Gérard on Damien. Despite the hardships and testing conditions of the Southern Ocean, it was always Jérôme and Gérard's favorite place to sail. Even after so many difficulties, they never gave up on their dream to sail there. The Southern world is still a free place, notes Gérard. After visiting the South Shetland archipelago, Damien continued north for South Georgia, where Jérôme and Gérard rekindled friendships from a year before. By May 1973, Damien was in Argentina and then towards Brazil. The circle was almost complete. Future plans. Throughout the voyage, Jérôme and Gérard had already begun making plans to build another 2 bigger vessels, strong enough to winter in the polar regions. Thus, their sadness on return to La Rochelle on 22nd September 1973 was eased by the excitement of starting another new chapter. France would be just another leg before they could return to living at sea, each one on his own boat. Jérôme and his wife, Sally, on Damien 2, and Gérard and his wife, Jackie, on Damien 3, later renamed Kotiki. Both were identical steel schooners with a hull length of 46 feet and a lifting keel. Although frequently seen as heroes, Jérôme and Gérard's goal was never fame, being an example for others, or breaking any world record. Their adventure was not an escape either. Damien meant more than just a yacht. The boat was a companion, which allowed them a lifestyle they most appreciated: total freedom. Where is Damien today? In September 2002, following a request by Gérard Janichon, Damien was classified as a historic monument in France. Years later, the boat was restored and put on display at the museum in La Rochelle, alongside Moitessier's Joshua. No booking is necessary to visit unless a group is large. Members of the Association des Amis du Muséum Maritime de La Rochelle, Friends of the Maritime Museum of La Rochelle Association, can still sail on Damien and Joshua, usually between April and then beginning of November. The former president of the association, Marina Guedes, said that when Gérard discovered Damien languishing in La Rochelle, the boat was a wreck. He asked a friend to buy him and have him restored by the La Rochelle Maritime Museum, but there was no money. He then launched a crowdfunding campaign, and the association was required to help because of its commitment and skills to maintaining Joshua and also restoring old wooden dinghies. The job was not an easy one. After estimates from shipyards, maritime consultants' advice, and availability of volunteer members, the association benefit from funding from the Ministry of Culture, the department of the city. Later, 2 private sponsors enabled the work to be completed. Gérard validated all the stages of the restoration. The association's objective is to promote Damien's philosophy among young people, adventures, exchanges, and respect, segue Alain. Following 7 years of work, Damien was relaunched on 18 September 2019. Jérôme Poncet and Gérard Janichon were both on board for the inaugural sail. Damien was not a boat, but like a twin of each one of us, our extension, explained Gérard. My daughter, Lucy, was also with us that day. When I handed her the tiller so that she could discover the Damien sensation, I wanted to cry. It was very moving and the transmission was successful. The association, who dedicated themselves to restoring the boat, did a fantastic job. Essa foi a história do Gérard e Jérôme a bordo do Damien, no final dos anos 70. É uma história muito linda que você pode conferir nos livros escritos pelo Gérard. Dá uma busca na Amazon, na internet. O nome original é Damien, 55 mil milhas pelo mundo. Damien, 55,000 miles around the world. Já foi traduzido em português, polaco e italiano, mas nunca em inglês. Quem quiser ler essa reportagem na revista PBO, Practical Boat Owner, eu vou deixar o link na descrição desse episódio. Espero que tenham viajado nessa fantástica aventura e a gente se vê então no próximo episódio. Como sempre, bons ventos!